Hello, everybody. It's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I'm super excited you're joining me here. Every Thursday, 3 p.m. Central, I get on my YouTube channel, I go live, I show something quilting related, I answer your questions live, and sometimes I do a giveaway, which is going to happen this week. So I have some fun stuff planned for this week's live chat. I'm going to share a little bit of a couple of the favorite quilts I had that I've done with Tula Pink. One of the favorite things over the past few years is getting to quilt for her, and done tons and tons. I can't even think of the number of quilts I've done, but I pulled together some of my favorites that you might not have seen, and I've got some video and some fun stuff. So very, very excited for that. If you are watching live, Jessica is here as always, monitoring the chat. So you can type your questions and I'll answer those at the end. Plus, if you are watching live, at the end of today's live chat, I'm going to be giving away this bundle of deliciousness. It's a fat eighth bundle of Tula Pink's True Blooms, 15 of the different prints in that collection. Just really, really gorgeous. So go ahead and leave your comment now. Say, hey, tell me what you think about Tula Pink. Hopefully it's all good stuff, right? And we'll pick a lucky winner. And those fat eighths actually come out of this True Blooms kit that I did on the Midnight Quilter. So if you want to kind of see them in all their glory, check out my YouTube channel, and then you'll see how that quilt goes together. So very, very fun. So let's get right to it because, you know, we've got a lot of stuff to show. First of all, a couple of upcoming events, announcements. I know if you watch me every week, you already know what I'm going to say. But save the date. June 8th is a huge day here around our Quilting is My Therapy, because that will be our annual quilt walk, and we have none other than Jenny Doan coming down. So stay tuned for more details. We have some fun stuff planned, but go ahead and mark that day off your calendar if you happen to live in the Kansas City area or will be going through the area around that time. And like I always say, we're only 45 minutes from Missouri Star Quilt Company, so you can kind of knock us both out at the same time. This is also the time of year where our Build-A-Quilt Block of the Month registration is open. I talked a little bit about that in last week's live chat, so you could check that out if you want to see the details. Or you can scan this QR code and learn all the good stuff. Basically, if you are participating online and you live in the U.S., $74.95 gets you 10 blocks, all the fabric, the pattern. You can watch the live chat and see all that. But be sure to sign up soon because it will be closing for the whole year before too long. All right, if you don't win this bundle of gorgeousness, I'm sorry. I wish I had enough of this Tula fabric for everybody, but I don't. So if you don't win, you can use the promo code TULA and get 20% off the fat eighth bundle, just for you that are watching the live chat. And you can get the link in the description box below for that. So you can win it. One lucky person will win it. If you don't, well, you're still a winner because you got the promo code for 20% off. All right, Tula Pink. I get asked so many questions about her because we have worked together for a long time, fabric designer extraordinaire, and it just so happens I'm working on some of her quilt market quilts, which means I have nothing to show. That's why I thought, oh, we'll just stay on the Tula Pink theme, but I'll just show you quilts I've done in the past. And then one of these days, I'll get to show you the quilts I'm working on right now. But throughout the years, it's been really fun watching her career explode, watching, my career go crazy. And I like to joke that Tula is like my work wife. We have so much fun together. We work on these quilts, and really the relationship is just too much fun. So I couldn't help but pull together a few of the pictures through the last few years. I've actually known her for about 14 years, and so it's just kind of fun to work our way and kind of see the progression of time. So that's actually a little peek into her studio. We were on True Up when Craftsy or Blueprint was around, and so that was kind of fun. And I don't always crawl in bed with Tula, but when I do, we're under some quilts. So just a little fun kind of sneak peek. But Tula Pink, so I actually met her through her mom. Her mom owned a quilt shop about an hour north of where I live, and I was her quilter, or I quilted out of the shop for a while and quilted for her customers and for her family. And then one day she called me and said, hey, my daughter is moving to Kansas City area. Would you like to quilt for her? She's a designer and her name is Tula Pink. Now, I will admit I didn't know who that was. I said yes, because usually my default answer is yes, but I didn't know who she was. But we met, had lunch, kind of talked about like vision and how this would work. And then, it was like our first date. And now we've been happily married for 14 years. So over the years, the quilts that we have done have been varied in size and style, and I can't wait to show you some of them. But when I started quilting for Tula, I was actually pregnant with my youngest daughter. And there's Haley, who right there on one of the quilts. So you can see here's a little tyke. I don't let my kids on the quilts anymore, but she was little and cute and the baby, so I had to let her. I do remember taking quilts for Tula and being deathly afraid I would go into labor halfway through one of the quilts. Haley's birthday is May 4th, which is right around quilt market. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deliver the baby in this quilting room if I can't get it done beforehand. So the first quilt she ever gave me was her Cartwheels quilt. And this is from the Plume fabric collection. So all you diehard Tula Pink fans probably know all her collections. And Plume was not the first collection, but it was pretty early on. I think she might have had 2 or 3 other collections before that. So she kind of gave me this quilt as a trial run. Now, if any of you out there are a professional long armor, nothing is more exciting / debilitating / crazy than saying, I'm going to give you this one as a test. Now, it's a good idea, but there's just a lot of pressure. So I was thinking, what am I going to do with this quilt? I got to make it look amazing. And I decided to do trapunto. Now, if you don't know what trapunto is, it's a very involved technique and it makes the designs puff up. And so all those motifs, I did trapunto. Never mind the fact I had never done trapunto before. And then I realized after the fact that I had to get the quilt wet. So not only did I have Tula Pink's quilt for a test run, and I'm pregnant, I also have to say, hey, can I get your quilt wet? I need to dunk it in the bathtub to dissolve this thread. And it was just kind of crazy. Thankfully, she's a good sport, and she let me do it, and I gave her the quilt, and she loved it, and the rest is history. So that was really early on, but as she started building up her fame and her skill set, she wrote a couple books, Quilts from the House of Tula Pink, or Pinkerville, I can't remember, and then The 100 Modern Blocks. So it was really fun. Through her, I first became a published quilter, which was my biggest goal at the time. If I could just get my name in a book or a magazine, I would know I had made it. And so finally, I did. Now, this quilt has a special place in my heart because it was huge, difficult to decide how to quilt, and really it was just angst the whole time. But gorgeous. I mean, 100 blocks laid out in a color order. I can't even lay out 3 blocks in color order. I don't even know how she does that. But the result was it turned out really nice. One thing I didn't know, and maybe she didn't know this either, they were going to take a picture of each quilted block and use that picture for the pattern. So instead of looking at the whole quilt, you are now just looking at a really close picture of the quilting on each block. I'm kind of glad I didn't know that because I probably would have been freaking out a little bit more. So I was kind of like, oh, geez, I hope I did a good job. But sampler quilts are already a little tricky in 100 different blocks. I mean, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to do next. So it was kind of fun. I took a progress picture. You can see I was getting towards the end of the quilt. You can see the unquilted area and some of that detail. What's pretty funny is as I was pulling these pictures together, first of all, it was like a rabbit hole down memory lane. And you'll also notice the quality of the pictures get much better as we progressed, as cell phones and stuff became better. So quilting for her books was a lot of fun. It's kind of stressful because you get a bunch of quilts at once. You got to turn them around really quick, but you got to make them look good so that, you can show them off. It was just crazy. So really, really fun. And then fast forward a few years and we end up writing a book together. So it's just kind of funny how it all goes full circle. This quilt is one of my favorites. It's Peaks and Valleys, and it was in a magazine. I can't remember which one now, but she gave it to me as a Delectable Mountain kind of pattern or block. And she said, I want it quilted like nothing has ever been quilted before, like totally unique. I'm like, okay, sure. And so this is really where I started kind of solidifying the whole dot-to-dot quilting technique, which, spoiler alert, is going to be the subject of our next live challenge or our next free motion challenge quilting along. But I love how you can take a very traditional block like this and put some modern fabrics and some different quilting and get a totally different look. And so one of the fun things that has happened quilting for her is she always pushes me out of my comfort zone. I don't know if she means to, or that's just me trying to keep up with her level of talent. But the quilts that she would give me were unlike anything that I'd seen before and was a really fun way to, kind of stretch myself. Like this. Like who else gives you a quilt with a dog smoking a cigar on it? Of course. This was from her Holiday Homies collection, and I loved that she did a Christmas line. So it was really fun to see the collections come through. And as she brings me the quilt with, like for market or for her new collection, that's usually the first time I've seen it. Sometimes she'll show me a picture, but really when I get the quilts when I first see it. And so it's so much fun quilting all those fabrics and discovering little things she's hidden in the prints, little tidbits, and really kind of falling down that rabbit hole and kind of having fun with it. So this one, I don't have a lot of pictures of it, but I loved the sashing. I loved the block. I loved all of it, really. But I loved the dot to dot and the sashing. It was kind of fun. And then, as the collections keep churning out, I think she said something like coming up is going to be her 50th collection. That blows my mind how you can come up with that many different prints, but she is talented and she is Tula, so that's why she can do it. But this one, I think, is from her spirit animal collection, and she did the Bjorn bear. And so really, about this time is when I started making videos and really kind of ramping up my YouTube channel. And again, nothing quite like a bear face and just enough background to put a feather to really kind of let you stretch your quilting wings. Now, it does not happen very often, but once in a random blue moon, Tula Pink gives me a quilt with tons of background area, tons of space to play, and solid fabric to boot. So when I'm looking at her quilt and I'm trying to decide how to quilt it, the most important thing is her fabric. Now, I know she loves me and she loves my quilting, but she's not selling my quilting, she's selling her fabric. So everything I do or all the designs I pick are meant to highlight the fabric, show off the pattern, be that final bit to the story that she's telling. If you've ever watched her Talking Tuesdays with Tula, it's so great to hear the stories behind the quilts and the fabric, and then to get to be a part of that story is just a lot of fun. So this quilt wasn't super huge. It had those hexagons. I think this is when her true colors came out. Stripes, dots. I'm sure I'm going to get this all wrong. But I didn't want to do anything too crazy in the background to detract from the beautiful prints in the center. And you notice all the designs are horizontal, kind of drawing your eye to the center like, hey, if you're wondering where to look, you should probably look here at this beautiful fabric. Now, as I'm quilting for her, and I would love to know, I should go to her house sometime and count the quilts we've done together. I think she has them all. Sometimes, rarely, I will remember to take a picture of the quilt before it's quilted. Usually I'm so excited to get started. We have a tight deadline. I just jump in and I put my headphones on and just start quilting. But this one, I actually took a picture beforehand. So this was part of her All-Stars collection, English paper pieced, which when she started doing that freaked me out. She'd show me the pieces for her very first EPP quilt, and I thought, oh, good. It's going to take her forever before she finishes that. I might not even have to quilt it. She might never get it done. But she did very quickly, and so I've learned a lot about quilting EPP over the years for sure. Now, like I said, I love to show off her fabric. That's the whole point. And so really, she's done all the work. All I have to do is trace the lines. I kind of feel guilty about that sometimes because she does the hard part and I come in and do the easy part. But quilting along the designs of her fabric is yet another way to show off that print, keep the quilting from detracting from it. And then I try to save the more crazy, in-depth quilting for other areas of the quilt, such as the diamonds around this part. Now, every once in a while, I come up with a quilting idea that makes me so happy, tickles me. I just laugh. I think it's so funny. And I decided when I got to the center of this quilt that I should do all stars around the center. And it just so happened that there was enough diamonds, and you can see like the purple in the upper right is the A, and then the pink L, and it just works its way around. It just so happened there was just enough diamonds for all stars and 2 extra blocks to act as a spacer. I mean, it was meant to be, obviously, and just a fun way to show off, again, the fabric and the name of the collection. And so I did that in a solid block so you could see it, and again, keeping the quilting fairly simple in the fabric. And it reminded me back in the day when I very, very first started quilting for her, back when we had more time, I would quilt her name. I'd hide it somewhere in the quilting and she would find it and we'd have a moment. I should do that again. It's been a minute. Then comes her anchor quilt. So this one is a very, very favorite of mine. I've quilted several of these for her, a couple for her here and a couple for Jaybird Quilts. And I love how whimsical it is. I loved the solid negative space. Come on, it's all about the quilting for me. And so having that much room to quilt while also kind of hitting this theme, too much fun. And as I was going through my stuff, I realized that I had video of me quilting it. I'm like, wow, that was great. Past Angela was on top of it. So I got some video to show you. So when I looked at this quilt and I knew I wanted to show off the quilting or the fabric, kept it, quilting fairly simple in the print, just some continuous curve. But that background was meant for me. And so first I thought, well, an anchor is usually attached to a chain or a rope. So here's the rope working its way down that anchor, mostly because a rope is easier to quilt than a chain. And then in the background, playing with different textures, different fillers, different designs. So closest to the anchor was like wavy lines. And then as you worked your way out, there were some bubbles to look like bubbles and swirls. And so even though I'm using some basic shapes, right? Circles, swirls, wavy lines, the way they work together really helps kind of, show the inspiration behind the quilt. I mean, not that you're going to look at it and be like, what is that? I mean, it's obviously an anchor, but it just kind of plays into that whole story behind it, all that fun stuff. And a little bit closer detail of the rope in the background filler. In the blocks, continuous curve. Oh, one of my favorite designs, especially if you have little squares. There's not a lot of room to do anything in there. And I really wanted to show off her fabric, so it just kind of kept it nice and simple there. Now here, let's see, there we go. We can see a little bit of a video in progress. So I have it loaded on my long arm and I'm working my way down and you can kind of see it in progress. And right there, right at the rope, you can almost see the registration lines that I mark to help me keep that rope where it needs to go. So sometimes I'm asked, how much marking do you do? Well, that's a perfect example right there. I'll mark my registration lines and then just use that as a guide, a suggestion. I mean, I try to keep it close, but nothing too crazy. And she actually has had me do 2 different quilts for her, 2 different anchor quilts. And one weird thing about me is that I don't like to do the same quilt the same way. I like to do them completely different because it's just more fun. So on this one, which I'll show you a full picture in a second, I got the idea of this anchor obviously belongs somewhere, and it probably belongs to the SS Tula Pink. Again, I am so easily amused that I just thought that was so funny. So quilting her name, quilting that on there, just a little fun, whimsical thing. I don't think quilting should be taken too seriously. I think it should be fun. And so that's a little bit of detail there. Then there's wavy lines, nice fast filler, and then we can see a little bit more of the quilting. Now, I do want to point out when I'm showing pictures of the quilts, I've edited the photos so you can see the quilting. Sometimes it's hard to see. And so it's not like if you looked at this quilt, you'd be like, oh my gosh, there it is. But definitely with the photo editing and the side light. So we can see that anchor, the background, still a bunch of different textures in that background area, but slightly different ones. And then you can see some different detail in the blocks. When I'm starting a quilt for her, or really anybody, I don't have the whole thing planned out. I'm kind of looking at it. I kind of know exactly like what I want the quilting to achieve. I want the quilting to show off the fabric or show off the block. And then I start doing that. I will tell you in the beginning though, when I started quilting for her, or even like when I started long arming back in the day, I would do a little bit more marking just so I could, do that. But the more I do it, the more comfortable I get with just registration lines. Now this one, I kind of imagined those circles, kind of swirly with the circle popping out. Those are kind of like bubbles, or they could be like barnacles, because it is an anchor after all. But whatever the reason, it's just too pretty. Now, one thing I did on this quilt that I'll never do again was some crosshatch. I don't like crosshatch. I should take this back. I love the way crosshatch looks. I don't like quilting it. It's very easy to mess up and it's very noticeable when you have. So I did some crosshatch on here, but just within defined areas, just little areas. And then I'm like, that's enough of that. In my mind, I thought the crosshatch might look like a net, kind of hanging down in the water like it might. So those swirls, those elongated swirls with the pebbles just acted kind of as boundaries to fill in with that crosshatch. It took forever, but I love how it turned out. I've thought about doing like a tutorial on it, but I don't know. It's a tricky thing. Maybe one of these days, but I love the contrast in the shape. Now here we can see a little bit, again, progress video. I've started at the top. I've added some swirls. You can kind of see how it started and how it ended up. But it's just kind of fun to see a little bit of it in progress. At least it was fun for me. And another detail shot here. Now, if Tula had given me this quilt and she had told me the most important thing were those stripes in the background, I would have quilted those stripes differently. instead of treating it all as one background. So it's like a light gray and a white. So really, I love to use the quilting to show off the most important part of the quilt. But since it was the anchor and not the background strips, I didn't feel it was necessary to quilt each strip separately. I just kind of treated it all as one background. And then you can kind of see some more detail photos. So just kind of up at the top, some dot-to-dot quilting, some serpentine lines, those wavy lines, and of course, all that crosshatch that took forever. All right, then moving on, it's fun because I can think of the collections, but I can't always place them in order in my head. That would be a fun, like, party trick or a fun game, right? Like, put all of Tula's fabric collections in chronological order. It would be tricky. But this one was from her Pinkerville fabric collection. So when this came out, we had opened our shop here in Kansas City, or Liberty, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And this was one of the first fabric collections that we sold in the shop. And it was very, very popular, very cute. And of course, the quilts were amazing. So this particular quilt, lots of triangles of different sizes. So I had so much fun seeing how many different ways I could quilt these triangles. And so really, even if I don't get a ton of background space, I still can have fun in the blocks that are there. So you can kind of see some of those diagonal lines just to draw attention, some echo lines to kind of, I don't know, highlight the direction of it. It was a lot of fun quilting that quilt with all the different shapes and all the different fabrics. We can see like some up close pictures here. I don't know how she pieces these all so fast. She is like the quickest piecer I think I've ever met, and she can really churn out these quilts. And in the center, again, bright, big, beautiful fabric going around some of the details, but wanted to add a little bit more detail to the star. So some more diagonal lines, some echo lines. But again, the quilting is just meant to show off the fabric, show off the details in the fabric. So very, very fun. I always have a fond memory of this one because this is the quilt I wondered if I keep this quilt and tell her I lost it, how much would my career be ruined? Like I'm weighing it out, right? Like if I lose 50% of my customers because I lost a quilt, would it be worth it? I haven't figured out how to quilt for customers, get paid for it, and keep the quilt. Maybe one of these days I'll figure that out. But I loved this quilt. Some of them are harder to give back than others. And then this is just the back of it. The extra wide fabric that she did for the Pinkerville was just really fun. And I think that might have been some of her very first extra wides. So you can kind of see some of the detail on the back. When you have fabric that's so busy and beautiful on the front, it's hard to see the quilting. So there's always has to be that, at least one back shot. Now this quilt, I feel like they're my kids, right? Every quilt is my favorite. I'm like, no, I love this one more. No, I love that one more. But this one was a lot of fun. So who else is going to make a pattern that is like a Loch Ness monster, right? A serpentine kind of thing. And so I will say this one was tricky to decide how to quilt. There's enough background area that I can do something in it, but not enough for a feather. That's usually my criteria. Is there room for a feather or not? And there was not room for feathers in the background. So I had to kind of, change it up a bit. So in those, pointy blocks and then in the background, just having fun with some different textures and some different designs. Figured, of course, a Loch Ness monster or, this kind of serpent monster is going to be in the water. Of course, that's what that's supposed to look like. So in the background, I just did some wavy lines. I did some swirls to make it give that illusion of water. And then in the blocks, I kind of alternated between some clamshells to look like scales and then some more dot-to-dot quilting. I love that quilting doesn't have to be difficult to be impactful. So here we can see some of the quilting of that background. Now, what's funny is when I'm quilting this, my camera is like right in front of me, so I'm kind of reaching around it, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what it looked like quilting it. This one wasn't tricky to quilt once I got the hang of what I was going to do, but I will say for every quilt I start, whether it's for Tula, for the videos I do, Midnight Quilter, the first quarter of the quilt takes like 3/4 of the time because I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to move from block to block, how's this going to flow. But once I get that first couple rows done, then we get building up speed. I know what I'm going to do. And at that point, it's just time to have fun and rock and roll with it. Now, I love throwing in pops of texture and different designs. I think it adds interest, like those little pebbles there. And if it's a design I don't love to do a lot of, like pebbles, I like to confine them to little areas to make it just enough until I get bored, and then it's time to switch it out. All right, in the blocks, again, like I said, I decided I was going to do some dot to dot and some there you go, some dot to dot and some serpentine or clamshells. You can kind of see what that looks like. When I'm quilting, even if I'm like on a time crunch, that does not impact the designs I pick, for better or for worse, right? I'm like, I want to do a multi-step dot to dot design in every other section of every block, even though it takes a while. But I love how it contrasts with those kind of clamshells or those scales in the other block. Usually, when I'm trying to pick out designs for a quilt, let's say, I'm looking at this, I'm like, ooh, what am I going to do? The rule I give myself is I just do the opposite of what I've done before. So really straight geometric dot to dot. So in the next one, I'll do some clamshells. The tricky part here, though, is I'm filling those clamshells in a triangle that's supposed to look like it's curving, right? So that was a little bit tricky, but I think it got close enough. And then add a little bit of detail in there. It's funny because quilting clamshells looks like scales, which is why I liked it. And it's just one of those whimsical designs that, I don't know, not everybody uses. I remember one time I put them on a quilt that I did for her. Actually, that very first quilt that you saw with Haley on it. And I did clamshells in some of the blocks. And I didn't love how it turned out. And so I made a big mistake when I showed it to her. I said, I don't really like how this looks. That's not what you should do as a professional quilter, by the way. And she said, I love it. I think it's great. So knowing that she likes those clamshells, I knew I can get away with quilting them like little scales. And here you can see, again, quilting them so they wrap around a curve. Not the easiest thing to do, but definitely lots of fun. If you want to try that, the main trick to remember is that the clamshells toward the center should be smaller and they should be bigger around the outside to help it turn around. But you might not want to do that. All right, so here's some up-close pictures of the face and some of the details. I think this quilt was just so much fun because of all the story behind it, right? The water and the monster and all that fun stuff. And then there was just a little bit of room at the bottom. So again, I'm quilting what looks like water, some wavy lines. You can kind of, at this point, I'm almost done with the quilts. I'm at the last row. Usually this is when she's wanting to know where her quilt is, and then I'm freaking out trying to quilt as fast as I can. But again, just using the inspiration of the quilt as a guide for the designs. It's pretty, I won't say pretty easy, but the idea there is it's water. So let's do some wavy lines. I also don't feel like I have to do difficult stuff over the whole quilt. So when I'm picking designs, I'll put my more difficult ones or the ones that are harder for me or more time consuming in some of the places, but then I always try to use designs that I know are quick and easy. It's very stressful to do new difficult things over a whole quilt. So when you're looking at your quilts trying to decide how to quilt it, just think, maybe I just have to do difficult stuff in one part and something easy for you in the rest. But when I got to the bottom of the quilt, I thought, oh my gosh, we need to put a baby sea monster on here because obviously there's room for it and that makes sense. In fact, I texted Tula and I said, this is awkward. I've been quilting your quilt thinking it was a boy and turns out it was a girl. And she obviously gets my sense of humor and thought that was pretty funny. So you can see that in the corner right there, baby Nessie. So that's a little tricky though. How do you quilt a monster like that? Well, you print out a picture and you cut it out and you use it like a template. And then you use your Versatool curve to quilt the rest of it. So it's kind of like figuring it out, MacGyvering it. What can I do to get what I need? And I think that's the only time I've had to take a picture and print it out, but it's kind of fun to see the before. And then there's the after. I love it when quilting is textured and detailed, but pulls you in closer. Like, what is that? It is. It's a little baby serpentine. And of course I quilted it just like I quilted the blocks because it's like its mama. And then the back of the quilt as well. So definitely one of my favorites. Loved that. All right, this one was a new experience for me. It's that English paper piece. It was pretty small, but for the first time, she had me use Soft and Stable as the batting. And so you can kind of see that foam behind it. And that Soft and Stable looks amazing when you quilt it. I took so many pictures of this quilt. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to look at all of them because the quilting just stands out so much and it makes that quilt lay so flat. It's just really cool. And so here we can see some of the detail and some of the quilting on there. Again, I'm kind of starting to sound like a broken record, right? In the fabric, which is the most important thing, going around some of the details. All of those little stripes are fussy cut so that they make that hexagon. Blows my mind, right? So I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to show that off by outlining that and highlighting it. So we can see here a little bit of the middle. Again, having fun with it. But the background, once I got to that spot, I was like, ooh, let's add some wavy lines, fill in that area, just have fun with it. Now, as you're quilting, as you're working through your quilts, as you're thinking like, oh, what should I fill in? How should I use it? Just get started. I know that sometimes we feel like we need to know the whole path before we go. And if you need to do that to feel comfortable, then you should. But most times we just need to know the next step or two. And getting started, no matter what the quilt is, getting started anywhere will usually help the design ideas come. And so even though there have been many quilts I've done for her that have stumped me, I eventually just had to get started and start echoing, start adding some swirls, start somewhere, and then the design ideas will come out. And just another, again, it's like my kids. Like, here's my kid playing, cheer, and here's the kid doing this, but we can kind of see up close in some of that detail. I was wondering why my computer was so full, the memory was so full. It's because I have all these videos on there of random quilts I've done, but really, really fun and pretty. I love, again, the contrast of differently shaped designs. It does a couple things. The different contrast between like the geometric dot to dot and those wavy echo lines just helps them separate from each other a little bit, but it also keeps me from getting bored, and I'm easily bored, so that really, really helps. So within the background, she'd already taken the time to design this beautiful fabric, and so all I had to do was go around the lines, add some textures, have fun with it. So just kind of let it flow. Now, I do use a lot of different designs on her quilts and even my quilts, but I try to use a thread color that blends in with the quilt top, and that really helps, give you that texture without overwhelming the beautiful piecing. Because, again, as much as she loves me, whoa, oh, there it goes. My computer just glitched a little bit. As much as she loves me, it's all about showing that off. And then kind of pulling out some of the piecing. Again, I'm easily amused, so I just kind of pretended like this was a block and added some dot-to-dot quilting in there. Pretty fun. Wow, my computer is acting up. Let's see if we can get through this okay. Yeah, we only got a couple left. There is that block right there that was fussy cut with the stripes to make that hexagon. Crazy. And so then I just went around those lines. So like I said, she usually does the hardest part of the job. I just get to just fill it in and be done with it. So here's the back of the quilt. Now, it's hard to narrow down how many quilts I do for her to like just a few, but this is kind of some of my favorites throughout there. So hopefully you have enjoyed that. And then one last shot. Look at that texture. So pretty. I think she turned this into a cushion or something, or maybe it's a quilt. I don't know. But it's been really fun, and I hope that this right here just marks the beginning of the stuff that we do together. Getting to work with her is so much fun, and it's a great time. All right, so after show and tell, don't forget to leave a comment because we're going to pick a winner. You can also get 20% off the bundle. Just use promo code TULA. Now, that's only good until next week, so make sure you use it, and the link is in the description box below. So I know I'm talking kind of fast, but I had a lot to get through. We'll see if we have any questions that are coming up. Thank you, Jessica. All right, when quilting on a sit-down machine, do I base throughout the whole quilt and then start quilting in the center of the quilt? Yes, I like to stabilize the quilt. It doesn't matter which method you use. And then I usually like to start in the center because it's never going to be heavier than it is right then. But you can start anywhere you want. Doesn't matter. I have everything to make the holiday homies with the ornaments. Would love to know how you would quilt that. Well, the holiday homies, and I think I've quilted one like that for her. With those big focal prints, I just went around some of the, like the dog smoking the cigar. Just went around some of that outline and then just added a swirl in the rest of it. Going around the lines of the fabric or adding some echoing lines, echo lines to show off your favorite blocks. I can't think off the top of my head exactly what that looks like. So I'm starting Christmas projects. Look at you ahead of the curve. Gosh, have you ever used metallic thread for embellishment? Is it hard on needles? I have used metallic thread and it's amazing because it has that beautiful gleam. It's not hard on needles, but you're going to have to go much, much slower. It's not as strong as the normal thread that you might be using. So you're going to loosen your tension and quilt a lot slower. So that is the one drawback. But it looks beautiful when you're done for sure. In what ways do I quilt EPP quilts differently than other quilts? Great question. Gosh, that's a great question. Well, if you think about using the quilting to highlight the most important thing, I treat it like any other block. There's just a lot more of them. But the one thing I have to consider is usually if I'm looking at a quilt that's just pieced, a regular pieced quilt, it's usually in a grid or there's usually something like that. But EPP tends to have their blocks kind of in clusters. Sometimes they, make those rosettes or those circular things. And so the only difference there is I'm just kind of always aware that the designs I'm using might create that secondary pattern. And so I think it's fun. But other than that, it doesn't really change how I do it. Now, I know if you're watching, you might be thinking, but what about stitching in the ditch, right? Because EPP doesn't have the seam pressed to one side. It's kind of like an open seam. I'm quilting that sucker so much it doesn't matter if it's pressed open or not. So do I ever get overwhelmed when starting? Negative space is scary to me. Yeah, because it is overwhelming. You have this whole big thing you got to quilt and you don't know where to start. And so usually just picking a place and getting started. I know that sounds so much easier when I say it. In fact, I say that out loud and I kind of hate myself for saying that, but really getting started will do it for you. Negative space can be scary, but instead of looking at the whole thing, look at it in chunks, right? So let's think about that anchor quilt. There was tons of negative space there. Well, first, okay, one section, the rope. I knew I was going to do the rope, so let's do that. Now let's fill in around the rope. Now what I'm going to put around that. So it's just that example that sometimes when we're trying to plan everything out, the whole thing, it can be hard to know where to start. But usually just getting started helps. Do I have any videos on quilting a border braid? I do not. Not a braid or a border braid. I was thinking rope, but no, I don't know. A braid. Maybe I'm thinking like cables. I don't. That sounds more like a hand quilting motif. Also sounds difficult, but no, I don't, unfortunately. But I would love to see pictures, or if you have, leave a comment on here and let them know how you've done it. That'd be kind of fun. What do I use to mark my quilts? I love the pounce pad and the stencils because I can quickly mark that. But you could see on that anchor quilt where I used my water-soluble marker. So if I'm marking like just, rough guidelines, I don't have it with me. But I love that blue water-soluble mark Be Gone. It always comes out. Never had a problem with it. Sometimes I'll use the Ultimate Marking Pencil, which is that pounce chalk, but condensed in a chalk pencil. So those are the two I use the most. And of course the pounce pads. But it doesn't matter. Whatever you use is fine. Do I always quilt densely? Yes. I love a quilt when it's quilted to death. It's also my natural style. Like I just tend to quilt smaller. But all the designs you've seen, you can quilt at any density. So if you don't want to quilt it as densely, you don't have to. What's great about it is you can kind of find your preferences in there. I love this little winky face, Jessica. Here's the question. Do I bind Tula's quilts for her? No. Even if I liked binding, I don't know if she would let me bind them because that would require me trimming her quilt. The quilting is pretty much the only part of the process she doesn't do. And so thank God. No, she hand binds her quilts, and that dense quilting, like if I'm doing pebbles right up to the edge, I'm always like, I'm sorry, Tula, that's going to be a pain. What is my stitch length preference? My preferred stitch length is a stitch that's not so big I can get my toe stuck into it when I pull the quilt over me. I don't quilt with a stitch regulator, so my stitch length is organic in length. I do tell new quilters, though, if you want a rule to follow, that 10 to 12 stitches per inch is usually a good option, but you can play with that. As long as the construction of the stitch is good, it's going to be fine. Is puffy batting only for a wall hanging? No, I mean, puffy batting will make the quilting show. It can give you some more warmth. No, you can use it on quilts, bed quilts. You can use it for whatever. Do I have a special blending go-to thread? So what thread color do I use to blend in to the quilt top? It depends on the quilt top. I will say the pastel colors are kind of my go-tos. The light pinks, the light yellows, the light creams. I rarely use white on white or black on black. A little bit of different there, but that's kind of my go-to. But again, it's all preference. All right, let's see who the winner is. So the winner of the Fat Eighth bundle, you're going to email us, contact us on our website. We'll get this sent out to you, and it's Yvette Weiland. So congratulations, Yvette. Thank you so much for watching my live chat. Don't forget, you can get 20% off of this. Just use the promo code TULA, and the link is in the description box below. And hopefully you'll be back next week for my next live chat. And if you're watching this, if you like the quilts I'm showing or like the live chats, I hope you'll give the video a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know that it's pretty cool and that other quilters should find it too. All right, well, I'll be back next week again with a live chat Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, and I'm looking forward to coming to that live chat knowing that the Chiefs have won their Thursday night game this week. So I normally would be wearing my Chiefs shirt, but, I've got to keep it on brand. So I'm only half serious. I hope you all have a great weekend. Everything goes well, and I will see you next week. Until then, everyone, happy quilting.